Can you see from there? Okay. All right. So thank you, everybody, for coming to the first class. This is the theory portion. As I mentioned, in the first series, we saw all the dynamics, the bandhas, everything. We studied the scriptures. The way I've arranged this workshop series is that in the first one, it's introduction to all the energetics, the prana, what prana is, what agni is, all that. Now, in the second one, it is how to make it as part of your everyday life. And this is from the scriptures again. So we will use the sixth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita as the core, and we will study some of these concepts. So the Bhagavad Gita is considered one of the two most important yogic texts, along with the Yoga Sutras. And the Bhagavad Gita is considered a yoga shastra. So the way the Bhagavad Gita, every chapter at the end, they say, Iti Om Tat Sat Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So Upanishad. So it is a condensation of all the Upanishads. Upanishad. So Brahma Vidya, it is the knowledge of the Brahman. Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre, and Sri Krishna Arjuna Samvada. It's a dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, and then they tell the name of the chapter. So this is how the Bhagavad Gita is described. In fact, in Sanatana Dharma, which people know as Hinduism, there are three most important sustaining pillars. One is the Upanishad, other is the Bhagavad Gita, the third is the Brahma Sutras. So the Bhagavad Gita is considered very important that way. And in this, we will study the sixth chapter, which is called Atma Samyama Yoga. That is, resting the mind in the Atman. The whole idea being that we mostly live in our heads. So it's as though there's thoughts that are there. It's as though there is some voice constantly next to us, constantly talking. That is very disturbing and unrestful. So when you place the mind in the body, to tune into some of the subtle sensations, this voice becomes quiet. So you find a lot of rest. So that is the entire idea here. Now, throughout this, there will be a lot of mentions of something called the Atma. And therefore, for that reason, I'm going to just briefly describe what this entire Atma thing means. Okay. So, whole idea in the yoga philosophy. So the reason we are doing all these asanas, everything, is to find some stillness. So in fact, you will notice that your mind is much more calm after the asana practice. And that's why I've scheduled it, made it in this way that about an hour and a half of asana followed by half an hour of theory, because the mind is much more conducive to learning about all this after asana practice. In fact, the meditation also is much deeper after asana. So in the yoga philosophy, there is Purusha and the Prakriti. So Prakriti includes the body, the senses, everything. And the mind is part of Prakriti. So when the Purusha and the Prakriti come together, this thing, the mind entity, it is formed. And it is the source of all problems. Then the whole idea here is to know how to distinguish from the mind, from the Purusha, from the body. The Purusha has different names: Atma, Drashta, the seer. Atma is the self; Dehi, the embodied, the one which is inside the body; Chitti Shakti, the power of consciousness; Swami, the owner of this body; Chit, Jiva, all those things. Now, there is one powerful analogy. So Patanjali calls this whole drama came as pratyaya. It is the screen of the mind, right? And it's like a movie theater. There is this all in the screen constantly. Images are played. There's sounds in the speakers, and at some point, when you start meditating, the images start to fade away, and then there is a silver screen, and what is seen in the screen is the sole spectator in the movie theater. That spectator is the Purusha. So Patanjali says when the mind becomes very still, it's able to see the reflection of the Purusha. The third sutra says Tada Drashtuhu Swarupe Avasthanam. The Drashta, the seer, is now it's able to see its own self. It resides in its own self. So that is the reason. So in the sixth chapter, it's about meditation, but it's equally valid for yoga practice. So in yoga practice, it's all about putting the mind on all these sensations, and the mind becomes very steady. When that happens, you find a lot of pleasant feelings. So that is what is going to take us to the mat and do this asana practice every day. All other reasons, for some people, it's more like bodybuilding, and it's so that they can show these fancy poses on social media. All those will fall away at some point. But if you're able to find deep rest, that's what is going to take you to the mat day after day. Okay, so I will, because Krishna is the one who is describing this entire, and this is considered a very important chapter. I will do a short invocation for Vishnu, whose avatar is Krishna. So this is a well-known invocation. Om Shantakaram Bhujagashayanam Padmanabham Suresham Vishwadaram Gagana Sadrisham Meghavarnam Subhangam Lakshmikantam Kamalanayanam Yogi Dhyana Vande Vishnum Bhavabhayaharam Sarvalokaikanatham. So there's salutations to Vishnu. He is the one who's attained by all the yogis, and he removes the bhava haram, the fear of existence that we have. He removes that apparently. So as I said, this the sixth chapter, it's the primer on yoga. And the way I've put the material together, it's in the traditional Advaita philosophy lineage. So I've followed Swami Paramatmananda's talks and the late Swami Omkaranda's talks. Swami Paramatmananda is absolutely brilliant. He has a great sense of humor too, and his talks are all in English. So he's just phenomenal. And the great thing when you listen to sannyasis is that they don't have a bank balance or anything, so they don't have vested interests. So it comes from a higher state. They don't have to show off their whatever their knowledge or anything. They just transmit what is given to them from their teachers, going all the way to Shankaracharya. So, as I mentioned, the notion of a yogi and asana practice in both in the Yoga Sutras and in the Bhagavad Gita, yoga by and large it refers to meditation, but we can use the same principles in asana practice. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna refers to a yogi as not one who does all these fancy poses, but somebody who has senses under control and is able to sit and meditate. So asana in all these, both in Yoga Sutras and in the Bhagavad Gita, is a simple seat or a seated posture and nothing fancy. So the principles, as I said, they can be equally used for asana practice. Now in the Bhagavad Gita, there are two meters used. One, so traditionally, all these people learned just by chanting. There's a certain rhythm to that. And one is the Anushtuk meter, and the second one is the Trishtuk meter. So Anushtuk meter is the one that's very common. The Ramayana also is an Anushtuk meter. The Trishtuk is used whenever they want to show some urgency, something like a war scene, something like that, then the Trishtup meter is used. I will just chant one shloka from each of this. Anushtup has 32 syllables, Trishtup has 44. So Anushtup meter, for example, Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 2, he starts off saying, Ashocyanan vachochastvam prajnavadancha bhashase katha sunagata suncha nanushochanti pandita. So it's divided into 4. Each has like 8 syllables, 8 syllables, 8 syllables, 8 syllables. So you sing it in this intonation that makes it the Anushtup meter. Now the Trishtup, it shows urgency. So for example, Najayate mriyate va kadachit nayam bhutva bhavita vanabhuyah ajo nitya shashvato yam puranah na hanyate hanyamane sharire. So this it shows that this Atma, it is neither born nor does it die. It's always there. Na jayate na mriyate va kadachi. Never has it ever died, nor is it ever born. It's always there. Shashvato ayam purana. This is ancient Purana. It's ancient thing. So it tells us with a sense of urgency. In this chapter, the most Trishtuk meters are there in the 2nd and the 15th chapter. 15th chapter is on Purushottama Yoga. That's the last series of this workshop. The other thing I wanted to just let you know is this. In Sanskrit, the verb, subject, verb, object, they're all kind of mixed. It's like German. It's still valid. So here, for example, Tatreka Grammana Kritva Yata Chittendriya Kriya. So then there, tatra there. So the way you would just read this thing is there, making the mind one-pointed and restraining the activities, seated in an asana. So you would first say, after seating in an asana, making the mind one-pointed, that's how you would write in normal English, but in a poetic way, because they follow the meter. It's all jumbled and it's perfectly valid too. One may wonder, so there's so many kinds of yogas that are mentioned everywhere. They'll say this yoga, that yoga, bhakti yoga. But in Vedanta, there are only 2 types of yoga. One is karma yoga, the other is Dhyana Yoga. Karma Yoga, Patanjali talks in detail. It includes meditation too. So in order to meditate, you need to put in some effort. Finally, you become one with the meditation. Bhakti, devotion, is also part of karma. Other is jnana, knowledge. And according to Patanjali and also Krishna, all the sources of problems are because of wrong knowledge. So avidya kshetram uttaresham prasuptatanu vichinna udaranam, Patanjali says. Avidya, because of lack of proper knowledge, all problems happen. Okay, so you're all kind of familiar with the Bhagavad Gita, right? So everybody knows. And how about Zoom people? Everybody? So yeah, so I'll just very briefly tell what's happening. So in the Bhagavad Gita, as you know, Arjuna is in the battlefield. He has to fight his grandfather, his cousins, everybody, and he doesn't feel like fighting in his own teacher. Guru nahatva hi mahanubhavan shreyo bhoktum vaiksham apiha loke. Instead of killing my guru, I'd rather shreyo bhoktum vaiksham, be a bhiksha. That is, begging for alms is better, he says. So he is now having second thought. So he says, he puts his bow down and says he won't fight. And then Krishna, by first telling him that the Atma is different from the body, even if you kill them, they are not doing anything to the Atma. That's the right thing to do. So he then builds up. Finally, he comes to this chapter where he talks about the glories of a yogi. He says, at the end, you'll see the last portion is so powerful. He will build it up to that. He says, even if you fail from yoga in this lifetime, you will pick it up right in the next lifetime. You will be born in a house of great yogis, all that he will, and he will say, tapasvipyo adhiko yogi, jnanipyo adhiko mataha. Yogi is greater than people who perform austerities, tapas, greater than scholars, and great karmibhyodiko yogi. So greater than people who do great feats, great warriors. Yogi is greater than everybody. Tasmad yogi bhava Arjuna. So he says that. So he paints the yogi in such a great light, and so he'll slowly build up to that. So there are six in this sixth chapter. There are six portions also. The first one, he talks about general disciplines. It's called Bahiranga Sadhanani. Then internal disciplines, Antaranga Sadhanani. Then he talks about the nature of meditation, Dhyana Swarupam. Even Patanjali talks about this. He says there are two, it's a tug of war. The external going vasanas, the vasanas which want to pull you towards all the sense objects, then the internal ones. So there's always a tug of war. And by doing meditation more, you're strengthening one vasanas more and more. That's what Patanjali says. Then he talks about the fruits of meditation, the obstacles to meditation, dhyana, pratibandha, pariharo, and then yoga brashta. What if due to some reason yogi is not able to progress in this lifetime? And then Krishna gives very grand speech. Any questions so far? The first portion, so I wanted to do Kurmasana today. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it, but we'll do it in the next class. The Kurmasana, so this is Kurmasana. So the first 9 shlokas, it's all about the yogi's detachment and balance of mind. Okay, the general principles the yogi has to follow. So a lot of these asanas have symbolism. So this is Kurmasana, this is Supta Kurmasana. So we'll do Kurmasana in the next class. Supta Kurmasana is a little difficult. It requires putting the leg behind the neck. So, but this symbolizes a tortoise. This is a tortoise with its limbs stretched out, and here the tortoise is pulling everything in. So yatha samharate chayam kurmongani vasarvashah indriyani indriyatebhyah tasya prajna pratishtita yatha samharate chayam. When just like a tortoise, kurma angani, like a tortoise withdrawing its limbs from outside and going in, indriyani indriyatebhyah, from all the sense objects, drawing the senses in. That person, tasya prajna, his wisdom is steady. Tasya prajna pratishtita, well established. So that is what Krishna talks about. There is a very famous video by this teacher called Richard Freeman. The video is titled "How Yoga Destroys Your Life." So, and I have a link here, so I'll send it to you too. Then he says your samsaric life, because you wake up at 4 a.m., you do all this asana, meditation, all this stuff. And a Spanish friend of mine, he told me that in Spain, basically, if you're a yoga practitioner, the serious yoga practitioners who practices in the morning, you have no social life, because they start socializing only at 9 p.m. It'll go until midnight. So you're basically an outcast. That's what it's a joke, but that it's true in Spain. But this yoga destroys your life. It's a joke, but it's a nice video. It's very inspirational. Okay, so okay, you withdraw the senses. So it's very difficult to withdraw the senses. That's why all these asanas, they call it the subtle sensations that come home. Some people are addicted to this asanas. There's so much so some people injure themselves. And it could also be the reason that they want to put on the social media so they get more likes. That is one reason. But there are some pleasures that come. It can be, it's called hlada. Hlada means this is pleasure not of the senses. It doesn't come because you're eating something, you're seeing something nice, or listening to something. It is all these things that come during your asana practice. It is very subtle sensation, but when you start focusing on that, you're resting your mind, just like a tinder, you're lighting a fire, right? Like that, it will go glow, and over time, you start doing your asana practice, because now and then you will find that And it's very interesting because it's like a surprise. Every time you have a different sensation for that. So this is one reason why people go on to the mat. They have to pay. So the successive states of pleasure, how to establish a regular practice. All the great teachers like Buddha, they knew that people are addicted to pleasure and they don't want things that are difficult. So that's why they transferred this external pleasures to internal. In fact, there's a great Zen teacher. I think he's no more now. He founded the San Francisco Zen Center. His name is Suzuki Hoshi, and in the 1960s, Menlo Park was like a drug capital of the world, and there were a few either college freshman girls or something. They went to him and asked him, "So can you please teach us how to get high without using drugs?" So, and then he taught them meditation, and they all became great teachers in their own right. So that's how a lot of people got into meditation, because of the states that it produces. Okay, so with this background, there are 47 shlokas in this chapter. Some of them I'll go through fast, but I'll just say everything for continuity, so you know how Krishna builds this up. But this is considered a very sacred chapter. So I will, some of them, if you want, we can chant together, but others I will just quickly go through. So the context here is Arjuna wants to flee the battlefield. He wants to become a sannyasi. That happens to a lot of us. Sometimes we are sick of work. We just feel like that we hate the boss. We just feel like quitting and just running away, even if we haven't lined up another job. So this is a very common situation we face. And then, so he wants to become a sannyasi. He wants to throw everything and he wants to go away. And Krishna is now telling him that yoga and sannyasa, they're one and the same. And in fact, the entire Bhagavad Gita, it glorifies householder life. Krishna actually says householder is greater. Even though you don't do everything for long, you are much more qualified to reach the Brahman, right, in the householder life. So, first shloka, it says, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashtrita Karma Palam Karyam Karma Karoti Yaha Sa Sanyasi Cha Yogi Cha Naniraktirna Chakriyaha. He says that a sannyasi and yogi is one who does their duty without depending on the fruits of actions, not somebody who's without sacred fire and who doesn't perform right. So the whole idea is when you become a sannyasi, you can throw away your sacred thread. You don't need to do yajna and all that. So that's the idea. He says that is not a true sannyasi. A true sannyasi is one who's able to do their duty without depending on the fruit of actions. Okay. Then he says, Yam sanyasamiti prahu yogam tam vidhi pandava nahya sanyasta sankalpaha yogi bhavati kaschana. He says that know that to be yoga, which is also called sannyasa, one who has not renounced this desires, the craving can never be a yogi. So he's now building up to defining what a yogi is. He says that if you want to, like, say, quit your job and just go away, then you'll be thinking, oh, I wish things are different. I wish I'm working there or I'm meeting my colleagues. So this is called sankalpa. Sankalpa is the first desire, the budding desire. So he says that a sannyasa, we can't be a sannyasi if you're not renounced your desire. Same thing with a yogi. Now, this is a very important sloka. So, a lot of Western people also have asked this question to Pattabhijayas. So, Pattabhijayas, they asked him, so what's the use of the first series of Ashtanga Vinyasa? He said, mainly Yoga Chitsa. The second series is Nadi Shodhana. And they said, what about the third series? It's all demonstrative. No real, it's just fancy poses. They don't have, I mean, it's okay, but no special effect. So like that, the entire asana, it is to still the mind. Once you get to a certain state, and as we get older also, we have to reduce the amount of asanas and increase the pranayama. So this says, Arurukshor Mune Yogam Karma Karana Muchyate Yoga Rudasya Tasyaiva Shamakarana Muchyate Arurukshor Mune. So for the Muni yogi who wishes to climb, Aruruksha means climb the path of yoga. Karma is the means, that is doing all these asanas, that is the means. Yoga Rudasya, one who's well established. Tasya Shama Karanam. So Shamaha here means calmness. So it's not Shama. So this is the third Shamaha. Shama means forgiveness. That is Shama. So this is Shamaha. Shamaha means calmness. For for one well established in yoga, then meditation is the means. So this is that way. It's an important sloka on how much is what. And then Bhagavan Krishna says, who is the one who's well established in yoga? Yada hinendriyateshu na karmasu anusajjate sarva sankalpa sanyasi yoga rudastadochyate. Now he says, when a person is not attached to sense objects or to the actions, that sannyasi who has renounced this budding desires, he or she is firmly established in yoga. So this is now he's going to define yogi. There are many definitions Krishna gives of yogi or yoga. One he says is that yoga karmasu kaushalam. Yoga is skill in action. Then he says, Samatvam Yoga Muchke. Yoga is equanimity. When you're able to maintain poise in all situations, that is yoga. So he gives all these different definitions. So here is where the sense objects, that's why this Kurmasana pose is very important. So when there was all this churning going on in the ocean, Bhagavan Vishnu taking Kurma Avatara, he is able to hold Mount Mandara on his back and not be affected by the poison that's spilling, all the gold, all kinds of things started coming from the ocean when they churned the ocean. Okay, now the theory is that the mythology is that Vyasa, who composed the Mahabharata, he wanted a narrator, so Bhagavan Ganesha was the narrator, but Ganesha had one condition, that Vyasa should not stop. After non-stop repetitively. Then Vyasa, he gave a counter point. He said, yes, I will repeat non-stop, but you have to only write down if after understanding. So, and that is why Vyasa installed a lot of Granthi slokas, these are twisted slokas, very difficult to understand. You will see that very soon in this. This is one of the Granthi slokas. For example, this is how it reads. Uttaredatmanatmanam na atmanam avasadayet atmaiva hyatmano bandhuhu atmaiva ripuratmanah. It's called a Granthi Shloka. And here, Atma is used in two different. Atma means self, right? One, he says, Uddaret, lift up. Uddaret Atmana Atmanam. By Atma, the Atma. So one Atma refers to the self, which is the body, the mind, all that. So lift the Atma by the self. Uddaret Atmana Atmanam. Then na Atmanam avasade. Don't lower the Atma, don't put poor Atma down. And he says, Atma eva hi Atmano bandhu. The self itself is the friend of the Atma. He says, Bandhu Atma Atmana. So Atmeva Ripu Atmanaha, the Ripu is a foe of the Atma. So this is a Granthi Shloka. So Vyasa was panting, so he basically could get some rest because Ganesha was figuring out, this is saying Atma, Atma. Oh, this is what he's saying. And then he wrote down. By the time Vyasa could take a few breaths, and one more Granthi Shloka comes here, and he says, बन्धुरात्मा आत्मनस्तस्य यैरात्मैवात्मना जितः अनात्मनस्तु शत्रुत्वे वर्तते आत्मैव शत्रुवत्. This is, self is like a close friend or relative of the Atma for those who have conquered the self by the Atma. For the unconquered self, the self will remain like any place of enemy. That's what Bhagavan Krishna says. Okay. So then he's going to define what a yogi is. So he says, Jitatmana prashantasya paramatma samahitaha shitoshna sukha dukkeshu tapamanopamanayo. Jitatmana, the supreme self of the self-control. Jita Atmana means somebody who has controlled the self. Prashantasya, well, it's peaceful. Prashanta is peaceful. Prashantasya. Paramatma samahitaha, well-controlled. Shita, Ushna, Sukha, Dukkeshu. Shita is cold. Ushna is heat. Balanced in cold and heat. And Atata, Mana, Apamanayo, honor and dishonor. Somebody who is very steady because his root is in his yoga practice. So that's why for a lot of these people who are able to have a daily asana practice, their root is in the asana practice. They find their peace, happiness, everything like that. It is these sensations which are called prada, which come from outside. In fact, even for me on certain days, I'm not an advanced practitioner, but certain days when I feel all this, I am able to carry those feelings throughout the day, and things at work don't affect me that much. So this is how a lot of advanced practitioners that I know, they're able to, even if their jobs are stressful, they find their happiness and everything from this yoga practice that they have at the moment. Okay, last one. So he says, he defines who a steadfast yogi is. Jnana vijnana triptatma kutasto vijitendriyaha yukta iti uchyate yogi samaloštashma kanchanaha. That jnana vijnana triptatma, one who is contained in jnana and vijnana. Jnana means knowledge. Vijnana means special knowledge, wisdom of the things beyond the ordinary things. That is the knowledge of the Atma and the Paramatma. That yogi, yukta iti uchyate yogi. Yukta means called. Iti uchyate yogi. That yukta is grounded. Iti uchyate means called. That person is called a steadfast yogi, for whom samaloshta ashma kanchana. Sama, same, loshta, earth, ashma, stone, kanchana is gold. For that person, earth, stone, and gold are the same. We are in time, so I will stop the recording here. And if you have any questions, you can let me